Yasmin Aliyah Khan over at TYT did a follow-up to on Rebel headquarters to a segment we were talking about, I think sometime last week, Podium Gate. Yeah. All that ways back. Podium Gate. If you're not aware, the basics is this. Sarah Huckabee Sanders paid $19,000 for a podium and then tried to push a law that said it's illegal to look in specifically to how she bought that podium. Awfully suspicious. Well, it turns out it's even more suspicious than it initially seemed. Yeah, we knew that the money went to her friend, and then she went on a Paris vacation with her friend, and that her friend didn't actually sell podiums. But it gets even more suspicious. Yasmin Aliyah Khan, ladies and gentlemen.
Huckabee Sanders, governor of Arkansas, has been...
That's not Yasmin Aliyah Khan. Darn it. Hopefully I have it up. Oh, I've got Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I've got High Spirits. I've got... Well, it looks like we're doing Midas Touch. Oh, I don't want that. Stand by, folks. You know what? It's not going to be a pretty recording. But it'll give you a little sense of what the live show's like. Here, I'll let you see something moving. My flapping lips. Oh, I prefer the Yasmin Aliyah Khan Rebel HQ version of this video because well, disappointing. I'm going to have to re-record all of this. Unless I go to my history. Here we go. Aha. Aha. Stand by. Okay, well, sorry, Yasmin. The white men have aligned against you again. We'll do another con piece at some point. Here's Midas Touch giving a much less entertaining breakdown.
Caught in a major political scandal that may not only lead to her being removed forcibly as the governor of Arkansas as things progress, she may indeed be arrested and charged with multiple felonies under state and federal law. This scandal is being referred to as Lectern Gate.
Yeah, because I figure if I do, then you would talk about nothing else instead of the important actions that we're...
It's Podium Gate, but okay.
We're actually taking today, which unfortunately is not surprising that while we are focused on things that actually impact our state and impact Arkansans, the media wants to spend all of their time focused on things that frankly don't. Any other questions?
The Republican governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, has been accused of buying a $19,000 lectern.
Okay, so never mind. That is the right video. Yasmin's just as lazy as I am. She doesn't want to... She's using Midas Touch. For the record, I have to do that because I'm not as smart as she is. And I need their help making the political point. But okay, all right, you rapscallion. Let's have a gander, because I like her breakdown here.
With taxpayer money, and now she might be facing felony charges for doing so.
They're going to do the audit. Do you plan to do an internal investigation in your administration?
I don't think it's necessary.
In case you don't know, a lectern is basically just a podium, and she allegedly spent $19,000 on one of these things. So I was curious, how much do these things normally go for, just for reference? So the most expensive one that I found when I was looking just very quickly, excluding any specialty or vintage items, was around $21,000, but that certainly wasn't the norm.
Now that's interesting. And that's 2 points. 2 points against fraud. Because if it was fraud, and the most expensive one that she could find was $21,000, why wouldn't Sarah Huckabee Sanders just do $21,000? Unless there's a very specific reason why she would do $19,000. Fraud.
That's the cost for a very high-end lectern that's, handmade and artisan crafted with real solid wood, etc. You can absolutely get a decent, well-made and functional lectern for a few $1,000s or even for a few $100s. It's just something that you stand behind, and it has a little tabletop where you can put your papers. Today, Governor Sanders doesn't even use the lectern when she's addressing the public because she says the media is just way too preoccupied with it. She says that the media wants to distract her and her people from focusing on the things that really matter to Arkansans. But it is a thing that matters to the people of her state, including her fellow Republicans, because despite her attempts to downplay the significance of the purchase, there's more to the story than just bad budgeting. So this all started when a blogger and attorney, Matt Campbell, made a Freedom of Information Act request back in June. Around the same time, Sanders and her friends, including Virginia Beckett, were on a girls' trip in Paris. Matt gets some...
Now, wait a minute. One thing real quick. Hey, gang, do you recall when I said FOIA this, FOIA that, FOIA is the strongest thing in a journalist's arsenal? 2 things I want to say on that. Number 1, ha-ha! Case in point, it broke this story. Number 2, I misspoke when I said that. It's not the strongest thing in a journalist's arsenal. It's the strongest thing in your arsenal. You have the ability to do a Freedom of Information Act request about anything that falls under it, which is most government business, at any time. It could be denied. They have to have a reason. They could theoretically charge you for the information. I know it sounds crazy, but they could. If it takes a government employee time to get the information, for example, let's say you want this. How much did that podium cost? And it takes a government employee 3 hours to pull it up. They could charge you for that employee's time. But aside from a tiny thing like that, if you're doing a serious request for information, there is a legal obligation that government officials have to fulfill your request for transparency. Just remember that. If there's something that you feel like nobody's looking into and it needs to be looked into, you can do it. And if you decide to do it, I will show you how. It was literally my job for 7 years. I will show you how to do it. It is not difficult. I'll give you the form. It is not difficult. And it's a hell of a lot of fun. These people are not used to having to be told what to do. And it's really, really genuinely satisfying to make these pampered motherfuckers have to do it, even 5 minutes of work.
The documents he requested, and he noticed a line item of note. $19,000 was paid to Beckett Events, LLC. Virginia Beckett, who was in Paris with Sanders, that's her company. Her company...
Why would $19,000 specifically stick out to him? Fraud is the reason.
Charged Sanders $19,000 for a lectern, even though her company doesn't really deal with the sale of things like lecterns. When this was brought up to the Sanders camp, they posted a picture of the lectern in question, claiming that it was a custom Falcon podium. Those usually retail for around $7,500, but then Falcon came out and said, no, that's not one of our podiums.
So just to be clear, they said this is a fancy brand of podium. This is a Falcon podium. But even though they said this is a fancy brand, the fancy brand still costs less than half of what they paid. And then the fancy brand said, no, it isn't. It is not one of our fancy podiums. Please, we are the true fancy podium people. That's at best a Palcom. That's at best like a Gucci knockoff. Certainly, we wouldn't allow somebody to say that's one of our fancy $7,500 podiums. They paid how much for it? My God, too much.
This was a fake Falcon that probably cost way less than $7,500. So why then did Sanders pay 19,000 taxpayer dollars to her friend's company, if not for the podium? We may never know, but we did see Sanders with her friends partying in Paris at around the same time this payment was made. You're free to draw whatever conclusions you want from that.
Way overpaid, it seems like, for a podium. Certainly suspicious that she tried to pass a law saying you're not allowed to look in. You're not allowed to look into this in particular. And shortly after the purchase was made, her and her friends boogie down France. Your dime. $19,000 still seems like an awfully specific amount. I know it was 19,200, yada yada, but why not 20? Why not round it out?
Started to heat up around the purchase, so in September, Sanders called a special legislative session in an attempt to change the Freedom of Information Act. She didn't want to turn over her Paris travel records or anything else that would have incriminated either her or her administration. To be clear, she was wanting less government transparency. But then we saw documents turn up, including an invoice from Beckett Events for the $19,000 Falcon podium. On the invoice, someone had written in the words, "to be reimbursed." The implication there was that the state GOP was going to reimburse Sanders and the taxpayers for the purchase. However, it later became clear through emails that were uncovered that the note was made after the purchase had been made public and that the note was intentionally not dated. The original
Just want to say we talked about that.
intent was never for the purchase to be reimbursed or for the state GOP to be involved at all. And to that last point, that's likely the reason why the purchase was set to just $19,000 instead of, say, $20,000. In the state of Arkansas, purchases over $20,000 usually require approval, $19,000 doesn't. So now, in tampering with the document, the Sanders administration has committed a criminal offense. And in all of this, Sanders was complicit in committing wire fraud. Going forward, Sanders could be facing...
Everybody hold up. Because you have to report it. 20,000 and over, you have to report. Under 20,000, you don't. So they picked somewhere in the 19,000 range. That's the most they're allowed to scam out of you at a time without reporting. And then some mothering hero did a Freedom of Information Act request about a series of expenditures. Had a head on their shoulders, happened to know that, I'm assuming, happened to know that rule about $20,000, saw something, a single line item worth $19,000 and went, wait a minute. Come on. And there it is. There it is. She didn't want to have anybody know about this. She just wanted that little receipt to float by amidst all the other paperwork. She didn't want anybody to pay attention. She's from a group that got started in times when nobody paid attention to anything. Look for things worth $19,000 if you happen to be going through the budgets in Arkansas. That's how many times these people steal from you. That's good old-fashioned corruption. Truly, that's like Tammany Hall stuff. You know, like $1,000 for a hammer, that sort of thing. That's what this is. If you're not familiar with Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed and all that, it was like the turn of the century corruption in the U.S. And basically what was happening was a government official was giving his friends lucrative government contracts. You know, fix up this room. But instead of if fixing up the room consisted of sweeping it and putting a coat of paint on one door for whatever reason, lacquer, let's say, on a door, and then charging the government like $100,000. And then what they would do is give half to the politician as payment for the ability to charge a ludicrous amount for almost no work. That's what Sarah Sanders has done here. Was there an actual kickback? Did she get an actual cash while she was in France with her buddy? I doubt it. Sounds like she just wanted to have a girls' night. And she has no soul or morals. She has certainly no sense of ethics. She's a Republican. So she scammed you for the money. She's very generous with your money. It's just standard corruption to her. Probably never occurred to her. Think of it as anything else. Think of it as anything out of the ordinary.
Felony charges and removal from office. Members of her own party are raising questions about the lectern, and her approval rating amongst her constituents is dismal. A recent poll showed that Sanders only has a 40% approval rating, which is below average, with 31% saying they disapproved of her and 29% remaining neutral. And when asked if Sanders would conduct an internal investigation into the lectern purchase, Sanders stated that she didn't think it would be necessary. If body language alone was any indicator, she doesn't think the investigation is necessary because she already knows what happened to the money. What I think is interesting about these types of stories is that Americans will be the first to call entire nations' governments corrupt, but we don't always recognize it or see it whenever it happens within our own government and among our own government officials. Maybe when we do, it's usually treated as like a one-off type situation, like a bad apple, if you will. But corruption doesn't occur in a vacuum. It involves complicity from at least a few different people. People who would have to be high-ranking enough to get away with wrongdoing and have the resources to cover it up. But we are the pinnacle of democracy. We have checks and balances. We're supposed to be above all of this, right? And that's kind of what makes it so scary whenever corruption does turn up here in the United States. It means that all of the checks and balances that we so cleverly put in place over the course of several centuries have all failed. Either that or they're working as they were actually intended to. It's hard to tell when the people writing the anti-corruption laws are the same ones who are in positions to break them. For example, why was Sanders, as a governor who had apparently committed a major crime, in a position to change the laws that would potentially incriminate her? Why are these
Whoa. Now do you know why I like this gal? That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. That is actually getting to the heart of the matter. We caught her. For the record, checks and balances worked this time. The FOIA request worked. This is akin to a Hail Mary, but it's a fair play. But why? Why in the first place was it possible for Sarah Sanders to do this and to be able to cover it up? She was in the process of covering it up when this all spilled out into the public eye. It's a great question for which Arkansans are going to have to come up with an answer. In Georgia, to stop their corrupt governor from issuing pardons to his corrupt buddies, they took away the governor's ability to issue pardons on their own. Arkansans, I would recommend you tell every politician running at the state level that taking away the governor's ability to cover up their crimes needs to be part of their platform.
Loopholes present within our current system. Were they put there intentionally? I don't know. I'm not suggesting anything like that, but I am saying that people in elected public positions cannot and should not be trusted to oversee and regulate their own operations. These loopholes need to be filled, but unfortunately, the people who can do that are the same people who are benefiting from exploiting them. There is
Agreed. Arkansans tell people running at the state level that you want them to run in part on an anti-corruption platform. That should be something that you can get bipartisan agreement on. Should appeal. If you have a savvy enough politician, it should appeal across the aisle. Taking away undue power from a position that is already too powerful is perfect. Perfect. It's a great issue to run on. Run on that. In the meantime, keep talking to your local news agencies. Make sure they stay on this like white on rice. It wouldn't hurt, by the way, to encourage politicians from all over the country, hell, all over the world, to talk about this. By the way, if you are from a country that is not the United States, I have terrible news for you. I have spent the last year soul searching, trying to find decent conservative party. You know, the model conservatives that we could say, this is what our conservatives could be like. They are all like this. Every country around the world that I have taken even a cursory glance at has a conservative party that is like this, because, at least in all the English-speaking places, we have spent the last 30 years under neoliberal hell. And this is how conservatives behave when they are given the opportunity. The good news is for you, you can use this as a template. A template for how to ferret out the absolute worst apples. So look at what they're doing. Look at how much they're spending. If you see odd expenditures, ask questions. Don't stop till you get answered. Another jailbird on the way. Maybe a cellmate for Trump.